My name is Mark Ezzell. I am the director of the North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program, and I have the pleasure of chairing the Governor's Highway Safety Association Research Committee. The Research Committee's role is to monitor and facilitate the research program funded by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, known as BTSCRP. In addition to NHTSA, we also want to thank our partners in the work with BTSCRP, the Transportation Research Board, who helps us administer the research efforts that we're going to be talking about today, as well as the others that are already in the process. So a special thanks to both of them. Next slide. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how can I potentially get involved? If you are with a state highway safety office, you may potentially be involved in three ways. One is to submit an idea for a research project or problem statement. If you've got some particular vexing problem that you're seeing in your state and that you believe other states could benefit from getting research for, that can help move the needle in your plans, then by all means, please submit a research and problem statement to us. We'll be talking a little bit about how to do that in a minute, as well as showing a real life example. Another way that you can be very helpful is by being a GHSA monitor. It is important for us to have monitors on these research panels to make sure that the work the researchers are doing stays relevant to state highway safety offices. You know, we don't want it to become something that is not relevant to those of us in behavioral traffic safety. We want to make sure that it's truly something that we can all use in the states. Now, in order to be a monitor, you don't necessarily have to be a specialist or even all that knowledgeable on the specific topic. But a monitor basically helps it stay within the lanes of the things that state highway safety offices need. The third way that you can potentially be helpful is to be a panelist. Now, if you're selected as a panelist, you're actually going to be assisting with the research panel itself. We are looking for people with some subject matter expertise in the particular area as a panelist. The good news is, whether you serve as a monitor or as a panelist, one, you'll learn a whole lot, and two, any kind of travel cost associated with this, because the panels are going to meet a few times during the course of the research project, those costs will be picked up and covered through the BTSCRP project. So let's go through a little bit of an example of how you actually submit a problem statement. You've got an idea in your state that you think requires a bit more research. The good news is, you don't have to be a Ph.D. to write one of these things. You've got to make it, we have worked very hard to make it fairly simple that somebody like me with a barely earned bachelor's degree in political science can figure it out. And if I can do it, you can do it. In fact, last year, we revised this to make it as accessible as can be. And we've already sent an announcement out saying that these problem statements are being accepted for the year. We sent that out on the GHSA listserv, and we're going to show exactly how easy it is. Here's an example. One of the first things you'll want to talk about is, of course, who you are, provide a little bit of information about who you are, who you're with, a possible title for the project that you want to do, and then there'll be a checklist of research areas that may apply. As I mentioned to you, this is an example of one. A research problem statement, you'll need to create one of those, which is basically a brief description of the problem that you wish to solve. And here's an example of one that is a real life example, one that we had last year. And then on the next slide, we're going to be asking for generally one sentence. Frankly, research objective. What is the objective? What do you expect to get out of this project? How can you briefly summarize what you think you want to get out of this? And then finally, some ideas of how this research can be made practical for state highway safety offices and others. And you can see in this case, they're looking at a promising practice guide for state highway safety offices and regarding engagement and outreach for underserved communities, one of the topics we're going to be talking about a bit in a little bit. So and then finally, there is an optional spot here for indicating the related research that has been done. Obviously, one of the things you don't want to do is to ask for a research project to be done on something where there was just some really quality research done, say, a year ago. So we ask that, and again, this is optional, to provide a little bit of a brief summary on the existing research done on this particular topic. So it's a fairly easy, straightforward process, and it is out of these topic areas that the Governor's Highway Safety Association Research Committee then picks those that will go on to become BTSCRP projects. And as we mentioned, the submissions are now being accepted through January 5th. You'll be able to see details of that at the link set up here, and we are accepting those through January 5th. We look forward to some quality applications from state highway safety offices and indeed from others. So please go on that link. TRB can provide some additional details. So now let's get to the meat of what you really want to hear about, which is our speakers, who will all talk about some recently released BTSCRP project summaries. Again, as Carrie mentioned, the folks who we have here on the call are all experts in their state highway safety offices, but they're not the researchers themselves. So their summaries of this is going to be brief, but useful for those of us who are in state highway safety offices. The first one that we've got is Edica Esqueda, who is with the Washington Traffic Safety Commission, where she is the program manager. She's been doing this work for 20 years, beginning as a community traffic safety coordinator in Eastern Washington, the rural part of the state there. She's one of the real leaders in Governor's Highway Safety Association, having done some groundbreaking work on our annual conferences, and she continues to lead that. Today, she's going to share with us a new tool that may help bridge the gap between partners who may share some of the same goals in the traffic safety community. Next, we have Dr. Staci Hoff, who is also from Washington State, where she's the director of their research and data division, which goes by the best acronym in traffic safety, RAD. The RAD manages Washington State's fatal crash information and provides research support to the traffic safety community for data-driven decision-making. And she's going to be talking about an e-scooter safety study that's just been released. We have Sheila Cozy, who is the cultural liaison with the Montana's State Highway Traffic Safety Section. And she's with Montana DOT. In this role, she manages a whole slew of different areas, including groundbreaking work around motorcycle safety awareness, teen driver safety, working with tribal communities and outreach with their STEP program and other areas. She's going to be talking about the recently released communicating safety behavior practices to vulnerable road users and some of the tools that have been created through that study. And then finally, we've got Dr. Max Roberts, who's the Senior Research Associate also at the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission. He manages their data dashboards there. He conducts a lot of research and analysis regarding trends in traffic safety and the behavioral traffic safety in that state, manages the research grant program there, and is also a member of the research committee of GHSA, which I chair, and is a member of TRB's standing committee on impairment in transportation. He's going to be talking about a new guide for highway safety strategies for rural areas and for tribal areas. So we look forward to your thoughts about these publications. We look forward to you possibly submitting a research idea, serving on one of these panels, as I mentioned, or perhaps serving as a monitor. As I mentioned, they're not the researchers. These are the folks who are going to sort of give you a summary of this. We're going to have links to the publications. They're in the chat box, and all of that will be included in a follow-up email that you're going to receive. And our goal for today is for you to leave energized about the importance of taking this research and really putting into practical practice. So we encourage your feedback, we encourage your participation, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Edica. Edica?
Hey, Mark, thank you so much for that, that introduction, and hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. I am going to talk to you folks about this BTSCRP research report number 7. I had the honor and privilege to present or to preside on a BTSCRP panel, serve on that panel as the GHSA monitor, a panelist, and the chair. So also, if I can do it, you can do it. I would really encourage you to look into that. I'm going to just chat with you a little bit about the this study. The title of the study is called the Improving MPO and SHSO Coordination on Behavioral Traffic Safety. It's a guide, it's a toolkit, it's what we I feel like it's going to be a really great opportunity to help kind of lead you to some potential really cool collaboration. So I'm going to jump right in, and here we go. So many of you, I'm sure, are very, very familiar with what an MPO is, but for those who are not, MPOs are, that acronym stands for Metropolitan Planning Organization. Those organizations operate at a regional level, and they're responsible for planning and administering funds in urbanized areas. And there's also companion planning organizations called RTPOs, which is the Rural Transportation Planning Organizations. So keep that in mind as we go forward and we're talking about this. MPOs do a wealth and a variety of things, and you know, things like analyze local crash data, they develop transportation plans, they connect to local decision makers often and frequently, they direct investments, among other things. MPOs do a whole host of things, but these are some of the, just a few of the things that you might find in their strategic plans and their operating plans. So why connect with MPOs? Why are SHOs and MPOs, why should they be working together? And the way I see it, I like the idea of thinking about MPOs as kind of like a relative that we just don't get to hang out with that much. We should be working with them, and they are a regionalized network. So likely every state in Washington and likely territories, or every state in the United States has at least one MPO. And they have such a reach into what's happening locally in their communities, but also we have similar goals. You know, we have, you know, that we're going in the same direction. And so what I would say is that if you take a look at this research, this toolkit will have things like literature review, which will inform this, give you more information there. And to create this research, they conducted surveys, interviews. Some of you may have even participated in some of those surveys and interviews with MPOs and HSOs. They did a ton of data analysis and in turn developed case studies and this toolkit. So HSOs and MPOs are two entities who primarily focus is to address issues on roadways that achieve a safer transportation system. I mean, that's directly from the book. That's directly from the kit, right? So this, I mean, essentially that's the sum of it. And a collaboration will really broaden the reach for both MPOs and HSOs, especially as HSOs focus on operationalizing the safe system approach. I think this is a real perfect opportunity. And I talk a lot about time. If we don't make time to do these, partnerships, if, assuming that they're not already established, it's going to be really detrimental. We have to operationalize some of these new initiatives that focus on multidisciplinary approach. Like, clearly we cannot do this alone, and we've been talking about that for a while. So now, as we start to integrate the safe system approach into our strategic plans, into our operations, how do we do that? And I think this could be potentially one way. So if you, one of those ways that you could do that is forging those connections with MPOs. MPOs can also really benefit from a partnership with an HSO in ways like sharing resources, grant funds. We can help provide them technical assistance, crash data, and so much more. Just think about all the things and resources that we have available to us and how we might be able to share that with them as a partner. And how we can benefit is like, MPOs also have do a lot of work with policy, potentially legislation. They also are doing a ton of work in reaching at-risk communities, and just have strong partnerships that may not be on either our radar or someplace not available to us. So it was really a beneficial, opportunity. This resource demonstrates partnerships and practices that implement behavioral traffic safety approaches. That's the short of it. It identifies challenges. So this toolkit will, state the challenges that MPOs and SHSOs face when, developing these partnerships and strengthening and fostering them. You'll see case studies in this resource. You'll see strategies for effective collaboration, and it will really highlight in detail the benefits of the collaboration between MPOs and HSOs. The case studies were really important to us as a team. I remember talking a great deal about wanting to pick areas in which we see success happening or success has been happening. So you'll see case studies and some key results from New York, Baltimore, Kansas, and Southern California. So as a result of those surveys and interviews, the research company did a lot to continue that, and then went further and did interviews on how to demonstrate how successful partnerships like these can be. And then lastly, I would just say that the tool itself can be a connecting opportunity. The guide and toolkit itself is a way to kind of engage that conversation with MPOs, whether it's at maybe a larger level or at that regional level. I love the idea of carving away some time myself. I'm planning on doing this, to use this actual research report to engage MPO contacts that we may have, to see if there's something in there that we can foster and build upon. You'll find things like sample agendas, presentations, and maybe goal statements or strategies in this toolkit as well. So from my perspective, it is kind of just like a one-stop shop. If like you want to engage in this toolkit, it's going to be, it's a quick read. I really, encourage you to take a look at it. I myself am not I went into this not knowing much about, the organization and kind of the operations of MPOs and RTPOs, and now participating in this work over the last few years on this project, I've been able to have a great deal more of exposure to this and really see the benefits of where a regionalized operation like MPOs should be integrated into the work of SHOs, especially now as we're looking at ways of integrating other elements of the safe system approach that are maybe not traditional to SHOs. So that was a quick overview of what you might find in this. There's so much more in there, and it's really well done, and so I encourage you to take a look.
Thank you very much, Edica. Staci, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here with you again. I'm Staci from the Traffic Safety Commission. I was the GHSA monitor on BTS 10, which is e-scooter safety issues and solutions. So about a year ago, I presented some information for another project I was on around adjudication data outcomes, and had mentioned at the time that the e-scooter project had been split into two phases because it was such an emerging topic. That just a reminder, last year, September 2022 actually is when it came out. There is a research results digest for the phase 1 of the e-scooter project, which is just a comprehensive summary of all the existing research through early 2021 as that work was wrapping up. So still a very relevant document for those thinking about e-scooter programs, or for states that are just being introduced to e-scooters in some of their municipalities and cities. So a reminder that that is there, and on the link that is shared to access the actual toolkit itself, that document is there and available for download. But the really exciting release of late is phase 2 of this project, which is the e-scooter safety toolbox. So I'm going to give you a very high level overview. I'm not sharing slides today because I encourage you all to just go download it and see what's available in the toolkit. Edica showed you her paper copy. I get one too. So just a plug for participating on a panel or being a GHSA monitor. That's one of the perks, is you do get a hard copy, complimentary copy when you're all done, whereas others have to go download it. Although if you want a hard copy, you can order that from the TRB website. I want to give a shout out to the research team on this project. It was a very large research team with representatives from UNC Chapel Hill Highway Safety Research Center, the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, Charles Brown from Equitable Cities, and Rebecca Saunders from Safe Streets Research and Consulting, which was some external expertise outside of the university research team to bring in additional components to this work around equity and community engagement. So I'm very excited for this toolkit. It really is focused on e-scooters, of course, but even if you're not doing something with e-scooters or don't even have e-scooters in your state, you should still go download this toolkit to look at the e-scooter example around the framework. So I'm going to throw out 4 buzzwords right now that should really resonate with our SHSO community, and that is the safe systems approach, transportation equity, community engagement, and shared risk and protective factor models. Okay, so those are all buzzwords that we've heard multiple times. So this research team was very, I think, plugged in to what's happening with changes in highway safety offices regulations and how we're thinking about highway safety programs. So right off the bat, this is a 40-page all-in toolkit. So like the one that Edica talked about, it's very easy to read and implement and think about. But the really unique thing about this toolkit is I believe that you can take this model and apply it to other program areas, like impaired driving, for example, or younger driver program. So while this is very specific to e-scooters, the model that they presented in really is a very robust example about how to think of these 4 buzzword elements across all of your programming. But back to e-scooters specifically, the safe system approach. They've created a framework for an entire program, safe program planning, using the safe system approach. So on page 12 of the toolkit, you can go there to see an example of how they organize the safe systems approach into the countermeasure strategies in each of those areas of the safe system. So again, it's all e-scooter focused, but you could easily plug that model in, that example, to be relevant to other countermeasure strategies you're tracking. Following that, they also incorporate guides and tools for thinking about transportation equity and how to engage the community in developing your safety program. Again, specific to e-scooters, but a good model for other programs. And all of that information is combined into the shared risk and protective factors model. For those of you not familiar with shared risk and protective factors, it's public health concept where it's kind of a mapping exercise where you'll look at the things in your state or community or ecosystem of your focus and identify those things that are preventative in nature and mitigating to the safety issue versus those risk factors that might be leading to the undesirable outcome or the severity of that outcome. So the research team has done the work for you for the e-scooter shared risk and protective factors model. It would be very easy for states building e-scooter safety programs to take that existing model and tweak it to be specific to the shared risk and protective factors present in your communities, whether that be at the state level or a local community municipality with an e-scooter program. So that shared risk and protective factors is on page 9. Those are my 2 favorite pages. There's lots of tools in here, but page 9 is the shared risk and protective factors. Page 12 is the countermeasure strategy table organized around the safe systems approach. So those are my 2 favorites, but the whole thing is a good read and quick. After they present the framework for e-scooter safety, they've also included a section on data sources. And again, this is another example of the research team being really plugged into what the needs of the highway safety office is. And maybe as the GHSA monitor, I was good at telling people what the needs of the SHSO is as well. But the data sources section of the e-scooter toolkit is organized around state's traffic records programs and the data quality attributes outlined in section 405C of our regulations. So again, it's not just talking about data sources that seem maybe new or new data that has to be collected. They've also organize that information in a way that will make it really easy for you to engage with your traffic records coordinating council on either obtaining e-scooter data or improving the quality of e-scooter data, or even conducting new data collection efforts like through surveys. All of that is covered in that section of the toolbox, and also going back to phase 1 and the research results digest, there's a lot of information about data in that document as well. And finally, you'll have to go download it to see these case studies, examples of like community outreach brochures that you can adopt to your jurisdictions or your state or your culture. And then there's also tools like checklists on how to coordinate e-scooter safety as part of a bigger micro-mobility program, for example. So I definitely encourage you to go download the toolkit. Again, even if you're not interested in e-scooters or have it, go look at it to see a applied example of how to bring the safe systems approach, transportation equity, community engagement, and a shared risk and protective factor approach in a single framework for a safety program. Thanks, Mark. That's my overview.
Thank you, Dr. Hoff. That's really good. I mean, e-scooters, they're not going away. So this is going to be very useful for those of us in large cities and smaller as well, because I suspect it's going to get even further. Thank you. And next we've got Sheila Cozy from Montana. Sheila, thank you very much. You're going to be talking about communicating safe behavioral practices to vulnerable road users.
I am. I'm so lucky to, I served on this panel, BTSCRP 13. This, although the title doesn't say so, this specifically focused on pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists. So since I do all 3 of those programs in Montana, I got to serve as a panelist, which was fabulous. That's all 3 of those combined is a tall order to put into one research pamphlet, because some of those don't might not have the same communications and outreach programs. But anyway, if you go to the next, like on the next page, it'll show you after the research after the research got started, it was awarded to the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute. I have to read it because I don't really know. So what they did was then they kind of tried to narrow that down so they could focus on specific problems that they're seeing throughout the state, which was great because, as you know, there's a big push right now for pedestrians and these types of safety communication programs. So this is what they found were the biggest problems for these areas: pedestrians walking at night, impaired pedestrians at night, bicyclists ages 45 to 65 in urban areas, and motorcycle alcohol use at night, which I thought was interesting because not surprising that most of these were at night, because these are motorcyclists are kind of motorists, but non-car motorists, I guess is what I would say. And so they are more difficult to see even in the daytime, and obviously it gets worse at night. So once they reached, drilled that down to what they were going to focus on, then we kind of got down into the dirt. And so part of the research for this topic was they use focus groups. So if you're like a Montana, and I don't know if they even use a Montana focus group, but I know they use focus groups. So like Bike Walk Montana, Montana Motorcycle Riders. So we would, at the panel would meet, and then they would go and bring our information, or first of all, the research, Virginia Tech would do all the research, bring it to us, and then we might modify it, and then they would take it to these focus groups that they had set up. So it's very interesting to read through this and see what the focus groups had to say, because I think that's where we're going to get our good information from, those actual users of those actual pedestrians and walkers, bicyclists and motorcyclists. This guide is great because it is a little bit longer. Those guys are talking about 40 pages. The one that, this one is a little bit longer than that. But obviously they're trying to set up a communication effort for each of these different criteria. And so they're trying to find the best venues, the best way to communicate to these groups. And so they're all different. They're not all necessarily like a one size fits all. Not a pedestrian communication project is going to fit a motorcyclist or a bicyclist. So there's a lot of material in there, and it's good material. So I suggest you read it. It's kind of long, but if you're like me, you're not a researcher, so the references and all of that you can just avoid, because that's what I do, and then read the good stuff. That's just coming from a state highway traffic safety office, because I don't want to offend any researchers out there. So in the document, there's a step-by-step guide on implementing the message, the targeted messaging for each of these groups. It talks about the best venues for each of the groups. Obviously TV, but some states like Montana can't afford to do TV, so they talk about other venues for these groups. I thought it was interesting because when I first got on the panel, and then they came back, we got on this panel right before COVID, so we didn't really get to meet in person a lot, which is all right. I mean, because we're in the virtual, but sometimes it's better to meet in person. But when I came back, when we got this virtually, and this was our focus, I was like, motorcycle alcohol at night, because I never really looked at that in Montana. So immediately I'm going out and looking to see, is that a problem? I think it just kind of gives you some outside perspective of where the problems may be, and maybe where you should even look in your own states, because I really wasn't looking at that as the motorcycle coordinator here, and it was interesting to look at that and say, I'm gonna have to go back and check that. So it gives you, just a different perspective than your own, which is always great too. One of the best parts about this, and I didn't write the page numbers down. Sorry, should have wrote the page numbers down, but I don't have the hard copy to show you, but it's online, and I think it might be in the handouts that GHSA is attaching to this. But one of the great things that they put in there is some of the barriers you may encounter when you're trying to implement these communication and outreach efforts. The best part about the list of barriers, it has a list of solutions with each barrier, and a lot of it is about the solutions. They talk about, and they give different scenarios, like if it's a lack of funding, and what kind of solutions can you make? Maybe you need to partner with some of these focus groups, like I'm talking Bike Walk Montana, that's just Montana now, but you know, maybe they want to be involved in trying to develop a campaign with us, and maybe they have some funding that we can pool together and develop a bigger campaign and have a bigger impact on the bike and bikers and walkers in our state. So I really like that about it. You can go to the next slide. There's a lot of stuff in there, but I just wanted to show so some of the stuff they came up with, and this talks about, this is some of the campaigns they came up with, and they would bring, after they met with the focus groups and they did all the research, they would bring specific ideas to us as panelists, and we got to review those and look at them and determine, you know, if we thought they would work. And I think, for me, I mean, I think the researchers are great, the media people are great, because, you know, you always need that help. But sometimes as a on the ground state highway traffic safety worker, you might be able to look at something and go, we might need to tweak that a little bit. So I'm plugging in for a panelist right now, because I think it's great to be able to be at the onset of that and being able to have some input into how things might be tweaked and might work better for the states in terms of a media messaging. So I'm plugging for the panelists. So, and then I just wanted to say that after I served on this panel, on the next slide, you'll see that we are implementing some of the things that they are talked about in there, because for the pedestrians, one of the big issues for them is visibility. We have a Native American safety program, and we have a lot of Native American pedestrian fatalities overrepresented, obviously. Part of that is, you know, the focus in the document, they'll talk about how to focus on being visible. That's in the guidance that this project ended up with. And they talk about the use of people in the community more than the use of us telling them what to do. So we are moving forward with this pedestrian project based on this research project. And so I highly recommend that you go out and read there. It will give you some new perspectives possibly, and then just kind of show you the best venues on ways to reach these at-risk groups that we were looking at. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Sheila. I appreciate that. That was a very useful study, and I can see where, you know, in a safe system world, we are recognizing that our design and the cars themselves are, you know, those that will cause oftentimes a pedestrian crash, but we have a responsibility as folks in behavioral traffic safety to work on harm reduction for pedestrians. And I think this study gives us some opportunities to try to work on harm reduction for pedestrians and gives us some good ideas for that. So thank you. And then finally, we're going to have Max Roberts talk to us. And after that, I'm going to do something that I'm going to spring on the panelists. After Max speaks, we'll all come on and then have some of the questions that Carrie and others have come up with and see if the panelists can help address them. But now I'm going to turn it over to Max Roberts. Max.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you very much for having me here. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be providing an overview and application of highway safety behavioral strategies for rural and tribal areas. Next slide, please. So this guide provides a toolkit of behavioral traffic safety countermeasures and strategies that can be implemented to reduce the frequency and severity of motor vehicle crashes that occur on rural roads and in tribal areas. And this guide is meant to be used by highway safety partners focused on rural and tribal road safety, such as law enforcement, local road owners, public health educators, tribal government, and more. Next slide. So although 14% of the US population lives in rural areas, almost half of roadway fatalities occur in rural settings. Rural and tribal areas require unique considerations for traffic safety as they often lack dedicated staff. So this means that the opportunity to promote and lead traffic safety efforts rely on those who are willing and able to take on that responsibility. One key recommendation this guide offers is to create diverse coalitions of interested individuals and stakeholders, which can help share the work and reach more people and voices throughout the community. Next slide. Now, behavioral countermeasures and strategies work by changing people's beliefs. And beliefs are our understanding or knowledge. So something like it's not safe to use a cell phone while driving. That would be a belief. And those beliefs that we have can then influence our behavior or actions, such as choosing to use a cell phone while driving a vehicle. And those behaviors can then have consequences such as crashes, fatalities, serious injuries, and so on. So by changing a person's belief, you can change their behavior, which can then reduce those consequences. And this guide describes logic models, which are a tool that you can use to understand this process of how a behavioral countermeasure or strategy creates change. So in the example table, we can see a logic model for high visibility seatbelt enforcement. The first column shows inputs, which are the things that we're investing in. So here, those would be things like officers to conduct the enforcement and media staff to produce messages. The second column are outputs, or what we are doing and who we are reaching. So here our activity is increased seatbelt enforcement and universal media campaigns. And our audience may be drivers in the specific county where we are conducting the high visibility enforcement. And then in the third column, we have our anticipated outcomes from the countermeasure. So these are split into short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes. And you can think of the short-term as the beliefs, the intermediate as the behaviors, and the long-term as the consequences. So the short-term outcome for this example is an increase in perception of getting caught or having a severe penalty if caught driving without a seatbelt. So this outcome changes people's beliefs about getting caught. The intermediate outcome will follow this belief change in an increase in seatbelt use among drivers, so a change in their behavior. And then finally, the long-term outcome to follow this change in behavior is a decrease in serious injuries and fatalities from not wearing a seatbelt while driving. So these logic models can help stakeholders make decisions about whether they have adequate resources to implement the countermeasure, and they can guide decisions about adapting countermeasures for your unique community. And they can inform ways that you gather information and learn so that your community improves with each time that they implement these countermeasures. And this guide provides several more examples of logic models and also a training video that can show you how to produce your own logic model. Next slide, please. Now, improving safety on your roadways is an ongoing process that involves 4 basic steps that are repeated over time. And those steps are to assess, to plan, implement, and evaluate and learn. And the guide offers 3 planning processes that have been designed specifically for rural and tribal settings, which are shown here on the slide. And these processes involve identifying stakeholders or leadership, compiling and or analyzing safety data and resources, determining emphasis areas, solutions and strategies, implementing those strategies and countermeasures, and then evaluating how well they worked. So as an example, let's say you have a speeding issue in school zones. So first you can collect data to assess how prevalent speeding is in given school zones and how frequently there have been crashes or incidents related to speed in those zones. And then you may reach out to school districts, principals and teachers, parent-teacher associations in an effort to build a coalition of stakeholders who can then plan how to address the issue. And then next, you would implement the proven strategies to reduce speeding, such as feedback speed signs or flashing beacons to notify drivers when children are present. And then finally, you would evaluate the information gathered to make improvements for future efforts. Next slide, please. So when it comes time to selecting your behavioral countermeasure strategy, it is best to select one that has been evaluated and shown to be effective. And this guide provides resources to help you identify potential countermeasures as well as examples of countermeasures implemented in select rural settings. Factors to keep in mind when you are selecting strategies can be categorized by the following general approaches listed here in the slide, such as laws, policies and rules, enforcement and adjudication, education, and intervention. So laws, policies, and rules include people such as local prosecutors or workplace policies, schools, and faith communities. And these entities establish clear expectations about acceptable behavior and can enforce and establish penalties for noncompliance. So for example, you can implement workplace policies with community businesses about never using a cell phone while driving. And then enforcement and adjudication may include coordinating with adjacent counties or state patrol for special enforcement activities, officer trainings, or partnering with traffic safety resource prosecutors. And working with these entities ensure that laws are being enforced, which will affect people's beliefs that they will get caught and prosecuted if they violate the law. And then next we have education. And the most common reason education campaigns do not work is the lack of dosage or exposure. And an effective education campaign requires significant exposure. These campaigns can change people's understanding or beliefs about certain behaviors, such as the risks associated with distracted driving. And then lastly, we have intervention, which may include DUI courts, ignition interlocks, or alcohol overservice and intervention training. And these interventions are focused efforts with people who have engaged in risky behavior or who are about to engage in risky behavior. So I just want to wrap up by noting that each community is unique and you should use your local data to confirm local insights and guide decisions and interventions. How one community addresses traffic safety may look much different from another community 20 miles down the road, but these logic models, planning processes, and general approaches allow flexibility in their design and application. And each can be adapted to serve specific traffic safety issues in your rural or tribal area. And it's important to remember that this is a cyclical and ongoing process that requires systematic learning to gather new information and refine and improve the countermeasures and strategies. So I encourage you to review the guide for yourself, as it has a ton of resources and links that can be used to help build your behavioral interventions to make your roadways safer. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Max. Thanks. It's a very detailed and very helpful report. Now what I'd like our panelists to do, if you don't mind, is cut your cameras on. We're going to have folks, Carrie has been monitoring the chat for questions, but I actually have a question for Edica around the MPOs. Can MPOs potentially help us with the public participation and engagement piece of what we as state highway safety offices are doing?
Well, remember, Mark, we're not researchers, but no, I'm joking. I will say
I can answer that question, but I'll let you do it.
Yes, I believe so. I believe so. But what we don't know is if we don't ask, if we don't have that initial connection with our MPOs and RTPOs across your states, they are very likely doing some of that public engagement because of the types of infrastructure projects that they're working on. So they likely have that already built into their business model. And so I would, if I were a gambling person, I would say that's very likely.
Yeah, I know in North Carolina, they do a fair number of those public engagement pieces. And in some cases, we're trying to just piggyback and assist. Carrie, I believe you may have some other questions for our panelists.
Yes, we do. And a reminder, if you are listening and you have a question about the research, about being on a panel, about being a GHSA monitor, or about how you can apply some of this research to you, please use the questions box. So our first question is for Staci. It says, e-scooter programs are being implemented at the local level. What role does the State Highway Safety Office play in implementing the e-scooter safety toolkit?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Carrie. As I already mentioned, the framework that was provided for e-scooters could easily be applied to other program areas. So that right there is very relevant to state highway safety offices. If you are not currently aware of whether or not you have e-scooter programs and which municipalities are managing those e-scooter programs, you should find out and be tracking that information. Once you know that, make sure that you're sharing this with your MPOs, RTPOs, your DOT, and most importantly, with local bodies of government, city councils and county councils, who in some cases, as you'll see in the case studies in the toolkit, work hand in hand with the e-scooter providers to develop a regulatory framework. Early on in e-scooter programs, literally overnight, you would wake up as a council member, for example, and see e-scooters, and there was no conversations or permission from providers to implement that program there. That's come light years from just a few years ago when that was happening. So certainly the role of the SHSSO should be making sure that your local jurisdictions who do have these programs are aware of this resource, that you're helping them access it, be aware of it, and make the effort to provide it to local bodies of government, either through presentations or email or however you want to share that.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Carrie, what else?
This question is for Sheila, and it actually is not about your publication. The question is, did you have any surprises being a GHSA monitor for the project?
No, Sheila was not a monitor.
Okay, you were on the panel though, right?
I was on panel, yeah.
All right, then let's switch the question around and ask that as a panelist. Was there anything that surprised you?
No, not really. Like I said, some of they just kind of opened different venues of ways of looking at things. I think that I don't think anybody that works in a state highway office, safety office, would be surprised that the focus was on nighttime, especially for these types of travelers. So I don't really think anything was that surprising, but I think that the feedback that they were gathering from these focus groups, and then determining the best venues for outreach, I think there was some options and some things in there that they found out that we wouldn't normally use as resources. So that is very helpful in that document. Just to kind of take a look outside the box that you might be looking at already, because I know the states are already working on these issues. I mean, these are issues that all the states are working on, obviously. So, but I think this just gives you a little bit more guidance on the best venues and things like that. I think it just helps out what the states are already doing, really. But it's always great to get another perspective and more information on projects that you're working on and trying to improve, obviously.
Carrie, any others?
Yes, actually, this question is not actually about a specific research publication, but perhaps a panelist is interested in this. The question is, and this is a pretty broad question, how can we measure if education and/or media campaigns actually work? He's asking about behavior change. Now, I know that's a huge topic, but if any of you would like to have at it, now's a great time.
I have a quick answer. Submit a problem statement. I don't think there is an answer, so describe what the problem is, submit a problem statement, and let's find that answer through BTSCRP, a future BTSCRP project.
I can tell you it's one of the key questions that we deal with. How are we sure that the dollars that we're spending on education are really making a difference? We've seen, causation and correlation are not always the same, but we've seen in small projects in North Carolina where we've spent money with very specific communities, and for that small amount of funds, we have seen changes in behavior such as additional, mostly around seatbelt use. But larger, more global, it's an absolutely fair question.
Max, are you going to take a stab? I have kind of to expand on what Max presented, which was when we're doing education campaigns, we often don't know what the perception, what the beliefs are, the attitudes, the knowledge is before we do those campaigns, right? So that's often a missing component and key to it. But if you have that information and you do a campaign that applies the proper dosage and the funding and the support, you may be able to go back, you know, post, you know, however long, to measure to see if those attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, perceptions, knowledge was that, if that needle moved at all. A lot of contributing factors to the fact that, you know, maybe it didn't, maybe it did, you know, things like pandemics or things like, you know, things that can really affect and squash progress, but can also, it might be one way to be able to measure. It's kind of simplistic when you put it that way, but at the end of the day, we have to kind of know where we are in order to be able to measure where we're, you know, if the needle is moved. So that's a huge key component to the things that, to, you know, address that particular question. So.
Well, folks,
Okay. I am actually going to, you'll see in the chat box, the link to submit your problem statements. And I'm also going to include, right now you can go to this link, which is the main BTSCRP webpage, to check out the completed and in-process research, because evaluations have been conducted in the safety education in the form of high visibility enforcement. So again, while that's a big question, we do have some smaller pieces, and that's a really good example if you're looking for ideas on what you can submit. Maybe something will strike your fancy. Maybe it'll get you thinking about something else. Well, Mark, we don't have any more questions, so I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Carrie. And a special thanks to all of our speakers and panelists today. Also, I want to thank NHTSA and the Transportation Research Board for their partnership and support of the BTSCRP program. Please be sure to follow GHSA on LinkedIn, Facebook, the platform formerly known as Twitter, for all kinds of updates on research publications and the problem statement request. We thank you all for joining us today. Have a great day. Take care.